We want to talk to you about California's election results.
Yeah.
In your opinion, how did it go?
Well, Californians, I think, in 2024, they gave a resounding message. And that message was, don't take us for granted and do something about crime. And when I say don't take us for granted, we started to see very interesting things happen in blue California. We started to see people from the cities, people from the countryside, vote a little more Republican than people expected. And we also started to see people push back very strong and very clearly on crime. And what I mean by pushing back very strong on crime, you had the district attorney in Alameda County recalled. It's the most progressive, most democratic county in the state. And they said to their progressive district attorney, we don't want you anymore. You had the mayor of Oakland recalled. And in Los Angeles County, we saw George Gascon lose in a landslide. But most importantly, Proposition 36 passed. And of course, Proposition 36 passed in every county in the state. We have 58 counties in the state. You can't get them to agree on what color the sky is, but they all voted for Proposition 36.
And they're very different, like San Francisco,
Yes.
and you got the rural counties.
Of course, yeah.
Can you explain to us, so these ballot propositions, there are more to them, right? So there is a minimum wage one, and then there's the rent control ones. And can you explain those as well?
Yeah, so again, California showed that it's a little more purple than people think. People think that the legislature is so heavily Democratic, and that's true. But when the state of California votes, all the people getting together on ballot propositions, you see a little bit more nuance. So for example, the voters rejected rent control very thoroughly. This is the third or fourth time that we've rejected it. And that's because I think people know that if you can't make money renting apartments, no one's going to offer apartments. And if nobody offers apartments and nobody builds apartments, the supply will go down and rents are going to go up. So that's one of the weird things about rent control, very counterintuitive, but the voters seem to understand that. The other thing that the voters surprisingly rejected was a hike in the minimum wage. That is something that is a core value. I personally think that it's something that's long overdue, but the voters rejected that. So of course the proposition that passed with the biggest margin was Prop 36. And Prop 36 was a reform of Proposition 47. And most viewers out there are familiar with Proposition 47. It caused a lot of problems on the streets. It made homelessness worse, and it also contributed to a rise in crime. People, every Californian would come to me and say, I am seeing changes in my community. And I would say, what are you seeing? And they would say, well, in my community, I have to shop behind glass. When I want to buy something at the drugstore, I want to run in and I want to get something very personal, I have to call and they come running and they get the thing from behind glass. That's no way to live. People have said that they can see that their local homeless people are clearly suffering from a drug addiction. They clearly need help. They clearly need rehab. And yet Prop 47 made it very hard to get people the rehab help that they need. And then finally, fentanyl. Fentanyl has been a huge problem in California. It is now the leading cause of death of young people, which is hard to believe. More than car crashes, more than anything else, is fentanyl poisoning, where some kid will take something at a party. They'll think that it's something else, but it'll be laced with fentanyl and they will overdose and they will die. And so Proposition 36 aims to solve all those three things, and I'm so happy that the voters passed it.
There seems to be a disconnect between the statistics on crime, we've been covering the crime a lot, and the idea that you see something is locked up and it costs that store a lot to go and unlock that item and give it to you. If it's like a $5 item, it costs them $2 to $3 to just do that.
Yeah.
On top of the headache for the customer and the bad service.
Sure.
But the crime statistics wouldn't show that. And then it seems like the state leaders looked at the crime statistics instead of looking at
reality. So of all the things I say today, this is the most important one. And people will listen after I say it, they'll say, what do you mean? How could this be the most important? We're talking about statistics. This is the most important thing that I want the viewers to understand. Crime statistics are not accurate. And they say, what are you talking about? Well, for an action to be a statistic, it has to go through a large chain of things, right? If I get up right now and I hit you over the head, right? First of all, you have to call the police. You have to have faith that the police will come, so you have to make that call. There's a lot of people out there who don't even bother calling anymore. Secondly, the police have to show up. There's parts of Los Angeles where police take 45 minutes to show up, if they show up at all. Third, police have to take a report. They have to actually write down what happened, do the time to do the paperwork for it to get in the system, for them to know that I got up and I smacked you, right? Fourth, they have to make an arrest. They have to take the time to take that person downtown and actually process them through the system. And that's where there's another big breakdown. We're hearing that in a lot of counties, police were so demoralized because they knew that nothing would happen, that they were not taking that person into custody. Fifth, that person has to be booked and processed. Sixth, they have to be convicted or plea. And it's only when they are actually convicted or they actually are they take a plea that becomes a crime statistic. So would hear people say, most often certain elected officials in California, they would say, Mike, crime statistics are down, crime is down. And I would say, what planet are you living in? All you have to do is walk down the street to know that crime is not down. Some statistics might be down. But again, that requires every bit of the chain to be contiguous. And if any piece of that chain breaks, then you don't get a statistic. And the statistics are not accurate.
So you think it could be even multiple times more based on what you mentioned? So at each point, if like half the people decide not to report and then half the time police doesn't show up, then it could be significantly higher.
For sure. I mean, if you take something like drug use, right? Before, if someone was caught with a few grams of crystal meth, they would be arrested, they would be convicted, there would be a mandatory minimum, and they would go to prison. Now, no one is saying, let's go back to those days. But if someone were to say to you, well, drug use is down, you would say, oh, come on. I mean, we're not arresting people anymore. We're not convicting them. They're not going to prison. We are not creating the statistics anymore. So people have to, at some point, trust different indicia besides crime statistics. So I think the leaders, with some exceptions, I think many leaders in 2024 made a lot of mistakes. If you look at what happened with Prop 36, for a while, the leaders in Sacramento were trying to take it off the ballot. They were trying to put a poison pill. They were trying to put up rival measures. And, I was sitting back watching the whole thing because I'm not there anymore. I can take pot shots, but I was thinking, wow, what a mistake. Because I could sense that the public really wanted this, right? 70%, right? That's a lot of, you can't just say it's Republicans, right? It's a lot of Democrats voting for that. It's a lot of independents. It's everybody. It's urban, rural. It's big cities, small cities. It's everybody voted for that, right? And so I was thinking, gosh, this is something that is so popular and so many people want it and they're trying to mess with it. And when they are saying why, they're citing these weird statistics that are not correct anymore. So I think they made some mistakes in 2024.
And how do you think things will change in California going forward after this election?
There are some things that will change in a very inside baseball type way. So for example, I think a lot of the politicians in Sacramento who have additional ambition, people who they look themselves in the mirror every day and they say, oh, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Congress member, or Mr. Governor, or Ms. Governor. I think the politicians who have future ambitions, who want to win additional offices, I think they're going to change their behavior. I think they are going to change their voting records. I think they're going to change what legislation they introduce because I think they have heard the will of the people. There's others who probably will continue, doing things that are not necessarily what voters want us to focus on. I think that's a mistake.
Can you explain to us what politicians in Sacramento look like?
I'll give you two different categorizations, right? I'll talk a little bit about philosophy and I'll talk a little bit about their hearts. So with philosophy, right? For the longest time in Sacramento, we have had roughly 2/3 Democrats and roughly 1/3 Republicans. The Republicans are all pretty uniform because their numbers are pretty small. But the two Democratic thirds are roughly split between moderate Democrats and more progressive Democrats. So, people will often say that there's two parties in Sacramento. There's really three. There's really, the Republicans, there's the progressive Democrats, and then there's the centrist Democrats. It's fascinating because when I was in the legislature, the numbers were bigger on the sides and smaller in the middle. But now, because Democrats have won so many marginal seats, I think there's a lot of Democrats who fit in that middle category. But it's fascinating because when there are certain votes where the Democrats really need to have uniformity, you will see the party take over and the party loyalties will take over and they'll be able to get things done. But still other things have been shockingly difficult to get through because of that centrist bloc. Now people will ask me, what are politicians really like in their hearts? And I say, well, the rule of thirds again applies. Roughly a third of people I know in elective office, and this goes back, look, I started volunteering for campaigns when I was 17 years old. So I've been in politics for a shocking many decades. With all the politicians I've met in my lifetime, roughly a third get in it for the right reasons. These are people who want to change the world, and they are able to stay pure in elective office. Roughly a third get in it for the wrong reasons. These are just awful people, and they just want power, and they often act accordingly. And roughly a third get in it for the right reasons, but the system corrupts them. And they get seduced by power or by money or by privilege or something like that. And really, it's this group that you have to work on, right? Because this group over here, they're just bad people. This group over here, they're pure people, they're good people. But the group that goes in for the right reasons but then somehow is led astray, those are the ones who break my heart.